Hi everyone. So I wanted to go over some tips to help you succeed in the next paper, especially related to paragraph topics and explaining your examples. There's at least 2 categories on the rubric related to that. And we don't have a lot of time in a 6-week course to spend on this, but I'm hoping the video will be clear enough and easy enough for you to understand that it helps you succeed in these categories. So in this paper, you're going to focus on proving whether or not you thought the author's rhetorical choices were effective or not. Okay, and then for each of your paragraphs, you have to have a topic where you state very clearly at the beginning of the paragraph what that paragraph is going to be about. So if you say, for example, the author is really effective, and you want to talk about how the author's choice to use humor in the article made his article more effective, then the topic sentence of that paragraph would have to talk about humor so that we know that this paragraph is about humor. Then within that paragraph, you're going to give examples to show us, walk us through why you think the choice to use humor was effective and why it was effective, okay? Assume that your reader either didn't catch those examples or doesn't understand why they're effective, and you're explaining that to us, okay? Now, I'm using humor as an example. You can use all kinds of other things to talk about. Anything you think the author is doing on purpose, as a choice to create his or her argument is something that you can talk about. Okay, so a few rules about this. So number 1, when you give examples, they should be specific examples. So rule 1, give specific examples. So you can't, for example, have a paragraph where you say, you know, the author's use of humor was effective, she was really funny, she told lots of jokes, and I thought her use of humor was really funny. I, as a reader, might have read the article and not even seen a joke. Maybe I didn't catch it. So that's one problem with a paragraph like that. Number 2, so you need to point to a specific one. Number 2, even if I did catch it, I might not understand why it was effective. So rule number 1 is make sure you're pointing to specific moments in the text, okay, that you want to talk about. So if you're saying their effective use of humor helped, was a rhetorical choice that helped their overall article be more persuasive, then you need to give examples of where humor is used to show that that is the case, okay? Number 2, when you do give examples, rule number 2, when you do give examples, try not to overquote, right? So you want to paraphrase, put it in your own words as much as possible. And when you have to quote, try to use short quotes, okay? Because we're not trying to read the original article, so we don't want copy and paste from the original article. We're trying to understand your analysis of the article, so it's better when you are in control. It's better when it's your words on the page. So you could say, for example, the author's use of humor was really effective. For example, the author tells a story about how he was running to catch a flight and he tripped over his own shoelaces, right? And so that's a paraphrase. I'm not just copying and pasting from the article what exactly the author said. I'm paraphrasing what the joke was, right? So you have to still point to a specific moment, but try to stay in control of that as much as possible by not over quoting. Number 3, once you give a specific example, you need to explain the example. So rule number 3, explain your examples. Okay, so let's say you've pointed to a moment of humor, you've even told me the joke. You have to then walk us through why that was effective, okay? Importantly, one common mistake that students make in a rhetorical analysis is they give a great example, and then when they give the explanation, they fall into summarizing the author's point again. So, for example, a bad explanation would be, the author used great humor in his article. For example, he tells the story of running through the airport and tripping over his own shoelaces. The author's point here is that we're all in such a hurry to catch our flight that we don't have time to put our shoes back on, right? In that case, I'm not explaining why the joke was effective. I'm explaining why he wanted to include that joke and leading into more explanation of his argument. So that is an ineffective explanation of a quote. An effective explanation of a quote would be something more like, the author's use of humor was effective. For example, he tells a joke of running through the airport and tripping over his shoelaces. This was a really effective joke to tell at this moment because it helped the audience connect with the author, or everybody's experienced this before, or it was a really good moment to tell a joke because he had just gone over some really serious and scary statistics and the joke helped lighten the mood, right? So the explanation has to tell us why the example is effective, why you think that was a good choice, not what the author wants to say. Okay? Why is this an effective choice? Why was it effective at including that thing at that moment? Again, I'm using humor as an example. You guys could talk about organization. You could talk about emphasis. You could talk about vocabulary. You could talk about syntax, personal details. There are hundreds of things you can analyze. I'm just using humor as an example, okay? So rule number 1, give specific examples. Rule number 2, try not to overquote. Rule number 3, explain your examples. And number 4, make sure that those examples are actually supporting the topic sentence. So a common thing that students will do is maybe they'll, have a topic sentence about humor. Maybe the first example is about humor, and halfway through the paragraph we're talking about something completely different. Maybe we're talking about emphasis now or word choice, and even while it's a really great example, it doesn't belong in that paragraph because that paragraph's about humor and this example is about word choice. So make sure that when you are revising and reading over your essay that your examples are in the right paragraph, okay? But it's really important that you give specific examples, try to paraphrase them or use short quotes when you give those examples, and explain those examples. And again, explain them in a way that explains why you think they were effective choices. Why did it work in that moment to do that thing? Not give us more of his argument, okay? If you have any questions about any of this, please, please, please just email me. When you are peer reviewing, reading each other's art, so you've all written a draft already. So when you are peer reviewing each other's drafts, you should be looking for this in the peer review. Where are some moments where the author maybe could have given a more specific example, or moments where they could have given a better explanation of the example? And those are in the peer review questions, but I really want you to pay attention to that because that is a really big key for success in this paper. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.